Hi, my name is Ted. I'm a student at Concordia University at the Dallas campus. And did you know that 65% of what we learn about one another when communicating comes from nonverbal communication? Additionally, 83% of adults, according to research, learn visually. This leads me to my thesis point tonight in my talk, and that is that I hope to show you 5 areas of nonverbal communication that will really greatly enhance the way we communicate and the power as we communicate using nonverbal methods that I'll cover in this presentation. And the first one is physical touch. Physical touch is considered the most direct form of communication. And it's a very powerful method of communication, but it's also considered one of the most intimidating forms of communication, nonverbal communication. And it can be a real attention getter, but it can also push people away. And it really depends on the culture and the background of your audience. And one of the things that I want to point out is that, normal or socially acceptable levels of touch vary widely depending on what part of the world you're from and what cultural background you come from. For instance, in Thailand, touching somebody on the face or the head can be considered rude by many in Thailand. And in a study conducted by Remlin and Jones in 1995, they found that physical touch in their study in people in Europe, that only 8% of people in England, 5% of people in France, and 4% of people in the Netherlands or Holland embraced physical touch. Whereas in Italy, 14% of the people, and in Greece, 12.5% of the people embraced physical touch. And there's a wide disparity and gap there between these cultures. In Italy and Greece, physical touch was more of a socially acceptable norm, whereas in England, France, and Holland, it was regarded in a less favorable light. So although physical touch is a powerful method of communication, most often and most likely it's going to not be the best or the first choice that you want to use as a form of nonverbal communication. And that leads me to the next form of communication, and that's the use of artifacts. Pardon me for a second. I have here my dad coffee mug. And I like to call this props. Artifacts, or props as I call them, can communicate a powerful message non-verbally to your audience. And they can communicate messages about culture, religion, politics, perspective, or just as a supplement to what you might be talking about. So if I was talking about coffee, which is one of my favorite subjects, I might hold up a Starbucks coffee mug, or my dad coffee mug, or a bag of Starbucks beans to drive home that point. And it really brings back that old adage of that pictures are worth 1,000 words. Images convey a lot of power, tangible images. And for instance, if I was talking, like I said, about coffee, holding up this coffee mug or another brand of coffee adds a whole nother dimension to the communication that's not verbal. Another point worth considering regarding artifacts, or props as I like to call them, is I went to a prayer breakfast many years ago, and I heard a speaker, and he was a former NBA basketball player and also a member of the U.S. Olympic basketball team. But one of the things that he was known for, aside from basketball, was the fact that he had memorized the entire New Testament and the Manhattan phone directory. Quite a feat. One of the things that he mentioned when he was speaking at this prayer breakfast is that he didn't have a photographic memory. But when he was attempting to memorize different materials, he always associated a tangible object or a picture with whatever he was trying to memorize. And that was his key to success for memorizing the New Testament and the Manhattan Phone Directory. And to drive this point home even further is the founders of Rosetta Stone software company also understood this concept too when they developed their software for language learning. And a key component in Rosetta Stone software and language acquisition is the use of images, pictures, and tangible objects to help our brains, to train our brains to take in and remember language. So what's the point of all this? Well, the point is that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and it helps our brain retain information and can be a very powerful tool in the communication process. So artifacts and their powerful nonverbal messages can be enhanced or supplemented with other nonverbal communication techniques, such as the use of proxemics. Proxemics, you might say, what is that? Well, proxemics is our use of space when we communicate. To give you an example, for instance, if I was speaking at a school, in a classroom, or maybe a school assembly, or even a church, and I wanted to drive a point home to the students, I might come from behind my podium, come around, and move in from that safe, normal, social distance that we observe, and come in closer and make eye-to-eye contact at a more intimate distance with one person in the audience while everybody else is listening. And that act of moving in from the safe, normal, social distance into that more intimate space or distance helps to drive home, not just to the person I'm talking to, but everybody who's watching, a powerful message. And so the proxemics, or the use of space when we talk, really, as a nonverbal tool in communication, can be very, very powerful. The fourth area of nonverbal communication that I want to talk to you about is paralanguage. Again, you might say, what's paralanguage? Well, paralanguage is it's a form of vocal communication, but it doesn't use words. So, for instance, some examples here would be using a cough, a growl, a huff, like, or a murmur, or a sigh, to enhance a point that we're trying to make. So if I were to, at a key point in the talk, huff and roll my eyes, it adds a whole nother dimension to this communication process. And so the use of paralanguage, and it also includes volume, inflection, are also components to this paralanguage that enhances our communication in a nonverbal way. And we can use things like eye rolls along with this paralanguage, like a huff or a sigh, to exaggerate a point, to really drive it home and make it memorable. Lastly, along with the loud sigh, we can also enhance our communication experience by the use of a lesser known or lesser used technique, and that is the use of silence. A dramatic pause, or a dramatic use of silence at a crescendo in a speech or at a key moment, can actually become an even more powerful attention getter than speaking loudly or charismatically. And it focuses the audience's attention in that moment. And they kind of have this building sense of anticipation of what's coming next, or added emotion that the speaker is feeling. It can be even a connecting moment. So ultimately, the use of silence, dramatic pause can really add another dimension and force to our communication. And with all of these communication methods in hand, we can add greater power and perspective to the communication process. And the use of powerful tools such as touch, artifacts, proxemics, paralanguage, or silence can add a whole nother dimension to our communication process and really drive home those key points that we want to communicate to our audience. So, I want to thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. Have a good night.